for those who are politically wise, a show about the lives of Christians in Ohio involved with politics. Introducing your host, Reverend Thomas Wise.
Greetings, my fellow patriots, saints, and sinners. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. This week's show is an interview I did with Representative Andy Thompson in his office in the Ohio State House. At the end of the show, there will be a blessing. Don't miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Next time you're thinking about beating the train, think again. It takes a typical freight train traveling 50 miles an hour, 1.5 miles to stop. That's nearly 18 football fields. Don't try to beat the train. Ohio's roads can be highways or dieways. The choice is yours. A message from Operation Lifesaver and this station.
The opinions and statements on this show belong to those who give them. The rest of the show belongs to Thomas Wise Words, all rights reserved. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Reverend Thomas Wise, the show is called Political Wise. I'm interviewing Andy Thompson in his office at the State House. Andy, tell my listeners who you are.
Well, I'm a representative for the 95th House District, which encompasses all of Noble, Harrison, and Carroll counties and portions of Washington and Belmont counties. I'm a husband and father of 3 children, a daughter 23, a son 21, and another son who's 13. And I'm a small business owner and somebody who's concerned about the trajectory of Ohio and which direction, and also what are the principles underlying it, and what trying to figure out that we can chart a course that is consistent with our faith and principles.
What is your business?
My business is Birdwatcher's Digest. My parents, our family in effect, started this magazine in 1978 on a wing and a prayer. But also, it's been a great educational experience for me to see the kind of sacrifice that goes into starting a business, to go off and get my college education, do some graduate work in the private sector, and then come back and join that family business was a real great opportunity for me. It was an opportunity for us to focus a little more on our family, because my wife got to stay home and be with our daughter when she was born. That was one of the motivating factors for us to come back to Ohio. Was she was pregnant with our first child, so she left the office of Senator Phil Graham, and I left an economic think tank in Washington, D.C. to move back to Marietta. And Marietta I've lived in most of my life. I was born in Pella, Iowa, now 50 this year, and so a young 50. But it's great to be back in the Buckeye State, as I have been for many, many years, and to play I hope, an important and effective role on behalf of my district and the citizens of Ohio.
So at the State House here, you are in what committees?
Well, in the Education Committee, on the Public Utilities Committee, and I'm Vice Chairman of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee.
Have you putting bills forward?
We have several bills that we're putting forward. One of the ones that has passed was my agreed-upon procedures bill. Kind of a technical way to save money for local government, local jurisdictions on their audit costs. So for those entities that perform well in their audits, they can get a reduced audit for 2 audit periods. And so it can save substantial amounts of money for local political subdivisions smaller than a county. So you'd have villages and water and sewer districts, and in some cases agricultural societies. So it's a great way for them to be rewarded for good behavior. And that was a bill that passed unanimously out of the House, and then it was amended with some component of Jobs Ohio. So the ultimate bill that passed was a little bit different than the original one, but the underlying purpose of it was to reward local government subdivisions for performing well on their fiscal responsibilities. We also have probably a much more significant bill for people of faith, which I would say is we call it our Obamacare kill bill. That doesn't sound very polite, but really what we're trying to do is to ensure that the healthcare freedom of Ohioans is defended. And your listeners will recall that we passed the Healthcare Freedom Amendment about the same time that Senate Bill 5 was being assessed, and passed with 2/3 of the voters' support to repeal the individual mandate and to stop Obamacare in Ohio. Subsequent to the Supreme Court ruling, Obamacare picked up speed, and we're still trying to see if there's a way that we can protect Ohioans based on their desire to not have Obamacare imposed upon them.
So the people voted not to have Obamacare, but it's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because that vote, it was just a referendum, right? It wasn't. It had no binding part of it. It was just an opinion poll.
Well, I mean, no, it becomes part of the Constitution. I mean, it's so it really says that the state needs to defend individual Ohioans from this health care plan. Now, the Supreme Court ruling of Justice Roberts attempted ultimately to override that in terms of supremacy of the federal government. But I think that's a matter that's still, I think, worth litigating. It's still worth fighting about. Certain attorneys in other states, attorneys general, are fighting this. I'd like for our own attorney general to take this more seriously, because I think you're constantly trying to determine and defend your state sovereignty versus the federal government. And what we've seen in a variety of areas, and what I confront as a legislator, is this federal intrusion into all aspects of our life, whether it is privacy issues, whether it is matters of faith like contraception, and also life itself, abortion issues, education. And that's where I find myself in a lot of areas where I'm fighting to defend our individual freedom, our ability to express our faith in the public square, and our desire to ensure that the federal government does not control us and does not control our state in a way that is unconstitutional.
And we will be right back after the break.
To some people, they're just a pet, a dog or a cat. But to you, they're part of your family. They've shared your lives, provided companionship, and given unconditional love. And just like when a human family member passes on, you want your four-legged family members to be treated with dignity. Baker, Hazel, and Snyder Funeral Home and Crematory has been caring for families since 1941 and now offers the same level of service for your pets at Snyder Pet Crematory. Call 274-1151. 274-1151.
That bill about Obamacare, how is that shaping up?
Well, we have had several hearings now. This is House Bill 91 for those listeners who would like to look it up online. Really what it deals with is, as Obamacare is attempting to be implemented, insurance companies would receive subsidies that they would pass on to individuals through the Federal Health Care Exchange that make the unaffordable Obamacare more affordable. But that triggers the imposition of penalties for those who don't get health care. So because it's made affordable by these subsidies, then people are obligated to have it, companies are obligated to provide it. And our bill says if they pass along those subsidies, they would not be in good standing, or they wouldn't be able to write more business through the exchange. That's how we're modifying this bill. We've been working with the 1851 Center to make sure that constitutionally that we don't trigger any problems. And Maurice Thompson there, who's an attorney, does an outstanding job. No relation, but there are lots of good Thompsons out there, fortunately. And but he's a brilliant constitutional thinker, and I think he's a great asset to our state in terms of helping us try to defend our healthcare freedom. So we call this Healthcare Freedom 2.0. It's in recognition of what's transpired since the passage of the original amendment, and we really want to make sure that we do everything we can to ensure Ohioans' healthcare freedom. And at the same time, we stop the present healthcare plan, which has massively spiraling costs and real intrusions on people's individual choice of a plan, choice of a doctor, ability to afford health care. So I call it, a broom in the spokes of Obamacare. It actually utilizes elements that were written into the President's health care plan, which grant back to the states the authority over regulation of insurance in the state of Ohio. So that's, again, another component that we're trying to reinforce. We have the discretion. We can decide how it transpires in the state of Ohio, and this legislation is really to help us thwart the implementation of the President's plan, and certainly to buy more time until we can see what the landscape looks like, which is based on the complicated aspect of this legislation, which nobody fully understands, and not my legislation, the President's legislation, which, remember, they famously said you have to pass it to find out what's in it. We're really finding out what's in it now. We're finding out how many terrible attributes it has, and so at least we want to try to buy time so we can marshal some more opposition, so that we can learn more about it, and hopefully ultimately stop it and return Ohioans' healthcare freedom to them.
So, will this also have something to do with expanded Medicaid in Ohio? Or?
The Medicaid expansion was a key component of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, as it's known legally. So it was. Don't fool yourself to not think that that wasn't a key component of it. And frankly, I believe that the Medicaid expansion is part of the President's plan to encourage more people to get off of private insurance and onto government insurance. Ultimately, I think his goal is to have everyone on a single-payer government health care system. So he can accomplish that by expanding Medicaid and by denying that people's existing health care plan complies with his law. And so ultimately there's and if his health care plan collapses, he'll likely propose that single-payer health care plan anyway. So all roads lead to a bad outcome, I think, for Ohioans in terms of their healthcare outcomes, their healthcare freedom, the qualities of services they will have, the availability of services they will have. And this bill, again, is trying to maintain, certainly as best we can, what I feel has been the greatest healthcare system ever known to mankind. The results show that. Not that, like other areas of our life, it doesn't have some problems that can be improved. But those areas upon which legislators agreed weren't the basis of the Obamacare bill. There were a few things sprinkled in there, but pretty much it was bad policy, and it was government takeover of decisions which used to reside in the hands of patients and doctors.
And we will be right back after the break.
Have you ever driven over a pop can? Well, when a train collides with a car, it has the same force as a car running over a pop can. Obey the warnings at railroad crossings. Don't try to beat the train. Ohio's roads can be highways or dieways. The choice is yours. A message from Operation Lifesaver.
So let's go back to your history here a little bit. What did you do before this? I mean, you were a small business owner, had a magazine. Were you elected office before?
Yes, I was elected to 3 terms on Marietta City Council. Spent 1 term as the finance chair on Marietta City Council. When I was elected to my 3rd term, I was in the middle of that term when I ran for and was elected state representative in the 93rd House District, so that would have been in 2010. Prior to that, I was also involved from 2001 to about 2005 with the National Federation of Independent Business with a local area action council. So I was the chairman of the local area action council for the National Federation of Independent Business. So again, being a small business owner, they're the most well-known and most effective small business lobbying organization. And I, as the local area action council chair, would help convene meetings of members and political officials to understand what was transpiring in government. And really what NFIB tries to do is to act as the emissary of small business owners, to act on their behalf. You know, business owners are busy doing what they do best, which is creating jobs and creating products and services that people want to buy. It's great for us to feel confident that our wishes and our priorities are being articulated by NFIB. And I'd been aware of them when I worked on Capitol Hill. When I came back to Birdwatchers Digest, I was very pleased to know that our small business was a member of NFIB. And then through my involvement there, I was able to maintain and participate in politics, because politics has been a passion of mine. I have a degree in political science and Spanish. We'll talk about Spanish another time. But really it allowed me to keep my foot in the game and to feel that I was making an impact. Our Area Action Council was very, very effective, very well regarded, and was kind of a model for other area action councils, not just in Ohio, but in other states.
Well, what do you mean by effective?
I think what we did a good job of was calling attention to issues to get members to participate, whether it was making phone calls or writing letters, whether making an impact on their representatives, and I think that's how you measure effectiveness. And then ultimately was the yardstick. How are we moving policy forward? Were we getting some substantive changes legislatively, which related to the priorities that NFIB and its members had articulated? It's a member-driven organization. They poll their members to try to decide where they need to be in terms of policy. And small business owners tend to be the more free market, low tax, reasonable regulation folks. Concerned with frivolous lawsuits and its impact on business, concerned with the bureaucratic obstacles that are presented when you try to start your business or when you try to continue your business. So in terms of our input into the political process and the outcome. So that's really the way you measure effectiveness. And then also at the state and national level, we received a lot of recognition for the work that we had done. So I was very proud of that. And my move into elected office was a reflection of the fact that I understood how politics worked and how the process worked. And I like to think of myself as a good communicator. So if you can combine good communication skills with an understanding of the process, you can get good outcomes. I think we had good outcomes in Marietta, but I realized that my options were limited in Marietta because you're subject to Ohio revised code. So my role here again is to find areas where we're fending off the federal government's intrusion, but also looking at the day-to-day soup to nuts, meat and potatoes aspect of legislating here and try to make sure we're business friendly as well.
The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Do you pray for a politician? Do you think a politician can be a Christian? Do you think a politician should stand up for Christian principles? Do you think politicians should pray together? Do you want to see more Christians in politics? If you said yes to any of these questions, please join the Ohio Prayer Caucus Network. Find the Ohio Prayer Caucus Network on Facebook. Welcome back to Politically Wise.
My third question here, how has your faith grown since you've been here? Or how has it been applied to your work? I'll leave that as an open-ended question. Any way you want to answer that?
Well, I think my faith has been solidified, and I think it's because often when I was young, I had some great role models. My great aunt was a very strong person of faith, really was my best friend, and she died in 1979. And I think what you try to do in politics and certainly in your faith is find other people who are on the same path you are. And that reinforces what your tenets and your beliefs. In my family, I was one who, Sunday morning, I knew where I was supposed to be. Not everybody always agreed on that. Some people would prefer not to have to get up and get moving, but I like to be surrounded by a community of faith because I think of them as your immune system. They're praying for you. They're thinking about you even when you're busy in your schedule and you may not be thinking about them. That represents a kind of cloak of, I say immune system because I think it's all kind of, you have a stool that makes up your life. You've got your marriage, you've got your faith, you've got what you do for a living, you've got family. And I think it's an indispensable component of that. And I try to, as a parent, I agreed that I would help my kids try to put them on a good path, that I would take them to church, and I kind of feel that responsibility. And my mom was another one, too. My mom was very dedicated to our church and very much a spiritual person, and so she's another role model for me as well. And I think that coming to Columbus, I saw all the temptations and the probably the cul-de-sacs or the one-way streets people can go down if they're not careful. Can be a very seductive place. And surrounding myself with other people for whom faith is an important component, an intrinsic part of their life, helps me stay on the right path. And I've obviously been pleased to get to know you, Pastor Wise, and I call on you in times of trouble and in good times, and you've been a great friend to me and a great friend to this legislature. And I thank you for the role that you've played to try and convene on a nonpartisan basis people who want to call on the Lord and want to serve and fulfill the Lord's will.
Well, you have definitely been blessed by the Lord, by great people surrounding you.
Well, I've never hesitated to realize that there are a lot of people smarter than I am, and I want to be surrounded by those people and hopefully benefit from their input, and likewise. I hope, and I should mention my aide too, Mike Sabo, who is unfortunately going to be leaving this office in a couple months. Mike's strong faith is an inspiration as well, and you see that in the way that he does his work. So, if you somehow find that you're surrounded by people who don't share that, that should be an indicator to you that you need to revisit what you're doing. If you find that people are doing things for the wrong reasons, you need to be aware of that and you need to respond. But we have a great contingent of people here who pray fervently and who walk with the Lord and who listen and who read the Word and then try to fulfill that as best they can. And God's communicating with us all the time, whether it's through other people or through just our prayer. And it's our responsibility to listen. It's our responsibility to choose wisely with whom we associate.
What advice would you give somebody that wants to get involved in politics? Maybe someone who wants to become a legislator.
I would say make sure that you come to politics with some principles that you believe in, because politics has a way of chewing people up. There are always folks, I think there are a lot of folks who have good intentions, many folks who have good intentions, but sometimes politics has a way of distorting your perceptions. Politics has a way of gobbling people up. Politics puts tools at certain people's disposal which might not be lead to the best outcome. So make sure that your faith is strong, make sure that your principles are intact, and then try to find people who can be allies for you. We realize sometimes you make short-term alliances based on whatever policy you're trying to implement, but I think regardless of your ideological disagreements with people, you don't have to be enemies on a personal level. You can still be a good person, a good Christian, and a friend, frankly, to other people, even if you disagree with them politically. And I think if you ever run the risk of characterizing people's motives as unholy, I think that's not for us to decide. And I think God will figure that stuff out. We're here on earth, but we want to again integrate the values of the Bible and people of faith, and leave those judgments up to higher authorities, and just try to again do the best we can to fulfill and be consistent with those our faith and the principles that we share.
Anything else you want to add that maybe I hadn't thought to ask?
I would just ask people to pray for us, regardless of, pray for the president, pray for your elected officials. Realize that they face a lot of challenges every day. Time is a challenge. The sacrifices you make in terms of your family are a challenge. The temptations and distractions are a challenge. But again, surround wherever you are in life. Make sure that you're you're understanding, and you can have insight into the folks with whom you're working, and again, try to guide them, because I think we have an evangelistic role here on earth as well, and in politics, and I think to the extent that we communicate God's message and His grace, I think that we'll land on our feet in a good way, and even if we don't get the outcome we always seek, we realize that continued prayer allows us to deal with any outcome that we encounter, and I think that ultimately we can play. I think we can play an important role for God here in the legislature, and I think and then impact a lot of lives in that way. What we legislate impacts a lot of lives, but how we conduct ourselves has an impact. We are role models. I think a lot of people in sports say, "Oh, I'm not a role model. I just shoot free throws." Well, wherever you go, you're a role model, a good one or perhaps a bad one. So the way that you conduct yourself and the substance of it, not merely the public perception, but substantively how you can conduct yourself, you are a role model. And so I take that seriously. Mike takes that seriously, and I know that you take that seriously. So that's important that we, again, be consistent as much as we can. We're all sinners. You know, we all rely upon the grace of God. But with your listeners, I would just ask them to pray for us, because whether I've been campaigning or whether I've been legislating, whether I've been a father or a businessman or whatever role I've been in, that prayer has always been vitally important to me, both my own and those who are praying for me.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a conversation with Representative Andy Thompson in his office at the Ohio State House.
The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Thank you for listening today. If you want to email me, you may do so at politically.wise@gmail.com. Please like us on our Facebook page, Politically Wise. Now, here's your blessing. Blessings based on Psalm 106, verses 1 through 3. May God bless you as you praise the Lord. May God bless you as you give thanks. May God bless you as you proclaim God's mighty acts. May God bless you when you act justly and do what is right.